Hey everyone, welcome back to the Good Place Bench here in Marrakech as part of the International Conference of Urban Health. And I'm joined here by Leslie. Thanks for joining in. We met during a dinner yesterday, and your partner was very persistent that I should get you on the bench and talk more about your work and why you're here. So let's get on with it. Leslie, please tell us a bit about yourself, where you're from, and what brought you to this conference.
I'm originally from Johannesburg, South Africa, and immigrated to the United States in 1976. Lived in Cleveland, Ohio, Boston, Massachusetts, and now Atlanta, Georgia. I'm a pediatrician. I did my pediatrics in South Africa, and then I did fellowships in Cleveland, Ohio, and I'm currently a developmental pediatrician, and I work also in children's environmental health.
Okay.
My major clinical activity is around children with disabilities, children who have autism, cerebral palsy, other congenital anomalies, who are premature and have lots of difficulties. And I work with them and their families in a variety of different settings.
Okay.
And I also am affiliated with the universities of medical school, actually, of the Morehouse School of Medicine in Atlanta, Georgia, which is a historically black university.
Mm-hmm.
And I also am affiliated with the Emory University School of Medicine. Why I'm here at the Conference on Urban Health is that I have a program that's called Break the Cycle of Children's Environmental Health Disparities.
Right.
And the concept of health disparities just struck me powerfully when I was in South Africa training in medical school and residency, where I would work during the apartheid era in white hospitals, or hospitals for the white population,
Right.
which were relatively affluent, and the hospitals were pretty modern and probably comparable to many in the Western world. And then I also worked in hospitals for the black African children. I was a pediatrician, and that was like third world. So I would spend some training time in one place, and then I would spend some training time in another place. And the juxtaposition was quite jarring. The sad realities for children who were I was seeing in the hospitals for the black African children were related primarily to malnutrition. Malnutrition, a major plague for African children, and malnutrition is really poor nutrition, undernutrition. They didn't have enough nutrition to grow properly, to develop proper immunity, and to fight diseases, so that in the summer months they would have major diarrheal illnesses, and many of them, being malnourished, would become dehydrated. They'd lose so much fluid that they had to rush to hospital to get rehydrated, and sadly, by the time they arrived, we were not able to save them, so many of them died. And then in the winter months, they would get pneumonias. And also at that time, it was before measles vaccine, they would get measles.
Right.
And measles, anybody in the sort of more affluent populations in the world would be an inconvenience, a rash, and maybe some other minor symptoms. But for children who are malnourished, they'd have major impact in pneumonias, meningitis, and it would also exacerbate tuberculosis. So these were devastating illnesses.
And this was primarily in South Africa?
In South Africa.
Right.
And so I left South Africa in part because of the political situation, and in part because I wanted to advance my studies. And I went to Cleveland, Ohio, to the Case Western Reserve University, where I originally did neonatology, which is focus on the health of newborn premature infants, and then on the consequences of the prematurity for from some brain damage resulting in cerebral palsy and other conditions. So I became a developmental pediatrician, and then I moved from Cleveland to Boston, where I was at the Children's Hospital, and then subsequently I moved to Atlanta, Georgia. Now in Atlanta, Georgia, I suddenly reconfronted my past of the major disparities between the more affluent populations who tended to be white and the poorer populations who tended to be black. And I thought, I mean, it was full circle. I came back to South Africa, which was very sad. And I realized that the situation of the conditions of children with cerebral palsy in Atlanta, who were predominantly black, were very similar to poverty in South Africa. So poverty, poor education, poor healthcare, poor nutrition. With poor education, they didn't have a sense of future. So the young women and the young men would maybe take drugs. The girls would get pregnant. They'd continue to take drugs. The babies would be born prematurely or having been affected by the drugs before birth, and they would develop cerebral palsy. And I said, man, this is crazy. I mean, it's like perpetuating the cycle of poverty. So once I realized that, I said, hey, man, I've got to do something. And if Lyndon Johnson in the United States, as president, all the government resources at his disposal, could declare war on poverty, and he doesn't win, what's Leslie Rubin going to do with a couple of $1,000? So then I realized, you know what? Every little thing we do in a positive way makes a difference. Now, it might not make the big difference we try and attain, but if you do enough little things, then you might make cumulatively a big difference.
And like continuously as well.
Continuously, right. Not only that, but because I was able to get some funds, but a very small amount of funds, I couldn't afford expensive equipment or resources. I decided to work with students. Now you can work with students and you can pay them and they're very happy with whatever they get. And then I challenged them to develop projects that would break the cycle of poverty and health disparities. So I launched the project in 2004, working with 5 students.
Happy 20-year anniversary.
Thank you. Exactly. This is our 20th year. Exactly. And I started with 5 or 6 students. One was a medical student. One was a public health student. 2 were law students. One was a student in psychology, one was a student in education, and each one of them developed a project. At the end of that period of time, we had a little conference, and they presented their work at the conference. We thought, wow, that's quite something. So we were able to get some funds to do this on an annual basis. And so now, after 19 annual cycles, we've had around 200 students. And we've become a little more sophisticated, and now we have a larger conference every year, and we have the students write their project for publication. So we published like about 200 articles written by the students in a series of international journals and books. So that's the kind of nutshell story of it. And in the process, just before I hand the microphone back to you, number one is that the students developed strategies to break that cycle. So we improve the health of children. But most importantly is those students then take that knowledge and that insight and that philosophy to their futures. And that's what the 2 benefits are.
I think that's what I wanted to ask and say, is that it's so beautiful that the break the cycle does create a new cycle, being a cycle of students and new generations that actually take on the thinking and the seed that you've planted. So it like constantly keeps on evolving and innovating itself almost. It's funny how to break the cycle and a new cycle works together. So thanks for that. Are there examples in these past 19 years? Is there one example that stood out as a solution that really created a positive impact on that particular society?
You know, there have been so many addressed issues of, let's say, lead toxicity on children, because lead causes brain damage in children, and poor children are more likely to be exposed to lead, so they lived in older houses where there's still lead paint on the walls that haven't been taken off, and it affects their lead affects brain function, so they don't learn as well and they don't function as well. Now, you asked me about one that I found memorable and powerful, was the one from just 2 years ago. We're a student in education, an education student. And by the way, I just want to digress and say, the students who participate in these projects from all different disciplines, education, psychology, health,
From all around
architecture, law, anyway. So this is a student in education who linked adverse childhood experiences with educational challenges characterized in the United States as emotional behavioral disorder. And I thought that was very powerful to look not just at the fact that children could not learn because they had behavior problems, but why did they have behavior problems? And what could be done to understand the behavior problems before developing some kind of remedial education program for them that they couldn't participate in because they were so emotionally disturbed by their past experiences, they couldn't even begin to apply. So this particular student, I worked a lot with her on her publication, and in speaking to her, I said, well, what do you want to do in the future? And she said, I want to go into policy.
Wow.
So I think for me, that was probably the most important transition process that I could want in a student who came to do a project.
And then finding her way in becoming a policymaker and being at the core of solving that problem. Wow, amazing. And are you guiding and mentoring all these students on an annual basis?
We're not their primary mentors.
Okay.
They all have primary mentors in the university where they're doing their projects. We provide an interdisciplinary cohort of faculty who meet with them on a monthly basis to review their projects, give them ideas, perspectives, and whatever project they're doing to put it into the context of that cycle of health disparities. Secondly, they meet other students who are a cohort in that process.
Beautiful.
So I think that's another kind of set of insights they get, not just into their own project, but into the bigger picture. And I just want to tell you one other example. A student has come to mind who was a student in environmental health, and she did a project on urban environments and the historic redlining in the United States. In the 1930s, during the Great Depression, the New Deal initiated by the President Roosevelt at the time created jobs for people, provided funding, incentives to invest in buying houses and property. And that process of funding was called the Homeowners Loan Association. What the Homeowners Loan Association of the 1930s did was they divided cities into districts. Districts that had high probability of yield on the funding investment, and then over successive grades, they created a grade that was hazardous to lending, and they would not lend to those people. So those who got money were able to invest and get equity on their houses. So whatever they earned, they could reinvest in the houses and live in them. And the ones who did not get the funds had to pay rent. So whatever they got, they had to spend. So they could not develop equity. It turned out they didn't lend to the minority groups who were African American or Hispanic or Jews. So they didn't lend to that group. And that area was color-coded red. So it was called redlining. So what this student did was look in previously red-lined districts to look at the temperatures and the air quality, and found that there were higher temperatures and higher amounts of toxin in the air in the areas that had previously been redlined. Now that particular student was going to be a medical student, but through that project she decided to go into public health, and subsequently from the University of Florida went to the London School of Tropical Medicine, of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, where she is now.
Beautiful. It's great. I mean, these stories are amazing to hear about and to listen to as well. You should start a podcast.
Do you want to do it for me?
Sure.
All right.
We can interview students. We can interview you. Sure. Good Place Bench travels as well to Marrakech. So
Bring it to the U.S.
good. I'd love to. Of course, we're here at the Urban Health Conference. I think you've been also asked to come and speak here, I think, to share. What do you think, what is to you like the most pressing theme or topic that is discussed in 2024?
Yes, at this conference, there are two themes, one of which is climate change, the impact of climate change. And my first presentation on the pre-conference day was on the impact of climate change on children's mental health.
Right. Which is also, you also brought a student, right?
Right.
Yeah.
My second presentation was on break the cycle of health disparities in Africa.
Okay.
And you mentioned the student. The second part of the theme is youth. How do you build up and cultivate youth participation, interest, and leadership in making changes for the better in the world where we're affected by inevitable and inexorable increase in global temperatures, increase in frequency and intensity of extreme weather events, and we don't even begin to look at what toll it's going to take on our natural environment, our built environment,
Right.
and on people, particularly the most vulnerable, who are the children.
As a father of two very young children, that's something also concerns me more than ever before. So that's how you walk through all these chapters of life as well, right? You get somehow connected to the theme that at that moment you care about most, and then you get into it more. That's also something I realize now, through also to talking to you. Leslie, as you know, we're on the Good Place Bench. As always, at the end of every interview, I ask, what is a good place to you? It doesn't have to be in a physical sense. It can be anything. And what would you tell others to say, okay, this is what we collectively should do to make sure that it remains or becomes a good place?
Wow. You know, when you asked me what's a good place for me, I thought of two things. One is being on the beach, being on the beach and the ocean. I've always loved to be on the beach and look at the ocean because it's timeless. It's totally timeless. It just keeps going. You could be on the beach in thousands of years ago, you're on the beach, or you could be on the beach thousands of years from now, you're on the beach. It's timeless.
Atlanta Beach.
Atlanta Beach, yeah, I wish. Anyway, there's lovely beaches down in Florida, white sands, beautiful clear water. The second is in a forest. and I have the good fortune of having an area behind where I live in Atlanta, which is called a floodplain, so nobody can build on it, and it's got some forest in it. So every opportunity I have, I go there, take the dog for running up and down, and there's a creek, so it's very, very nice for solitude. But the other thing is spaces where you interact with other people. For example, home, where I live, and my wife, and we have the good fortune of having 3 of our 4 children live nearby, and they have a collection of 6 children of their own, so we have 6 grandchildren, and on a weekly basis, especially Friday night when we celebrate the Sabbath, we all gather together, and it's a wonderful, wonderful place because the family gathers, number one, and number two, you're kind of, it's a special time and a special place. It's not just an ordinary everyday night. It's one that commemorates the end of the work week and the beginning of a day of rest, which is more than just a day of rest, but it's a special day to kind of just shut down from the rest of the world. And then the third conceptual one is with other people, like at this conference, like many public events where you're with people brought together by something specific, but you're all different and you share different ideas and thoughts and insights that enrich you and help you to go on for the next year or so.
Nice closing statement, because that's what this conference is about, right? Bringing all these beautiful people together that work on a good place and on urban health. Leslie, I'm going to thank you for your time. All the luck with Break the Cycle. I'm definitely going to check it out and follow it and meet one of your students perhaps later on. For everyone watching, thanks for your time. Appreciate it. And see you next one.
Inviting me, gave me the opportunity to just think through a few things that you asked me.
Absolutely. It makes you appreciate it all that you do, for sure. All right. Have a nice day. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.